Well, hey guys, Colton here. Glad to be with you on whatever day this comes out, hopefully Tuesday or Wednesday. But I am in Phoenix for the Urbana Missions Conference with Katie. We're excited to be here. We're going to be talking to students about serving overseas all week. And so be praying for us. There will probably be, anywhere between 5,000 and 8 students here this week. And so, we're at a hotel. I've tried to find a quiet place, but there's music going on and there's people walking around, so some people are going to get a sermon and they don't even know it. So, anyways, I'm excited to bring to you our first of one of the mini sermons from our series in Luke. And shouldn't take that long, but I'm excited about some of the stuff that we're going to jump into. So, let's start with our text, Luke 2, 41 through 52. Let me read that for you. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it. But supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey, but they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem, searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking him questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. So I was thinking about this text, and I guess I was just remembering back to when I was 12 years old. And I was thinking, what was I like back then? Because I think you have an idea of what you were like, but you're not really sure. So I'd ask you, what were you like at 12 years old? What kind of activities filled your day? Just to have a little fun, I messaged some of my family members, and I asked them, what was 12-year-old Colton like? And this is what they said. I've got some snippets of some comments that they made. Here's some observations about 12-year-old Colton. Goofy and fun. Okay. Pool shark. Was good at pool. I'm glad they thought so. Wore your shirt on backwards often. Loved Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers. And then another family you put your underwear on backwards a lot. Thanks. They talked about how, they told a story, and they just talked about it in a long message, about how one time I didn't want to eat my spaghetti, so I took my spaghetti and I secretly hid it under the rug under the kitchen table. So I took all the spaghetti and I just stuffed it under this really nice rug under the dining room table. And one of my family members really remembered that. Now, why do I mention that? Well, because today we're going to look at what Jesus was like when he was 12 years old. And I'm sad to say that I could not find many similarities between me and Jesus at 12 years old, which is probably how it should be. So we're told in verse 41 that Jesus and his parents go to Jerusalem for the Passover. Passover was the first and most important of the 7 feasts that God commanded his people to celebrate. It was a time of great joy, a commemoration of the exodus of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt that marked the beginning of their nation and kind of defined them as God's people. In fact, to this day, the Jews still consider the Exodus God's greatest act of salvation in the Scriptures. So after the feast ends, everyone leaves to head home, but Jesus stays behind. So Mary and Joseph are like, and I'm paraphrasing here, they're like, "Where did we put the Son of God? We lost him." I'm obviously kidding. But they're in a situation that I'm sure a lot of you parents can relate to, right? You're going about your business and you realize, oh my goodness, where is our kid? I remember when I was a kid, My mom forgot me at Walmart one time. Like, at some point, I walked up to some lady at Walmart and I was like, "Hey, I can't find my mom." So, they did the whole thing where the employee gets on the loudspeaker and they're like, "Calling Sharon White. You've got your kid up here," and she wasn't even in the store. And I'll never forget that. And I gave my mom a hard time for that for a long time. But one small thing I noticed in this text, before I kind of get to the meat of the text, one small thing I noticed in this text for you parents, we're told in verse 48 that Mary and Joseph were distressed. And I actually found that comforting for you. It's okay to be distressed about your children. Like, even the parents of Jesus were distressed. Now, I do think there's limits to that, obviously. But I think sometimes parents can beat themselves up for caring too much about their kids. And yeah, there's an element where you do need to be trusting the sovereignty of God with your child's life. But it's okay to care. It's okay to be distressed a little bit about your child. You love them. And the parents of Jesus loved him. Now, there's something that I specifically want to spend some time on here. I want to ask the question, okay, why is it significant that Jesus was at the temple? And how does that play into the rest of his ministry and his life that's going to really pick up in chapter 3? It's significant because it speaks to some things about Jewish life that aren't exactly made clear to us in the Western world in 2026. Now, I'm stealing some of this from Kyle Smith, who led a summer session on understanding Jesus as rabbi back in July. If you haven't heard that talk that Kyle gave to our church, I'll have Paul link it in the description so you can go and listen to that. It's awesome. So I encourage you to go and listen to that. Another helpful resource that I use in this part was a book called Sitting at the Feet of Rabbi Jesus. It's a great book if you're looking for something to read. Awesome. Cannot recommend it enough. So when I say the name Pharisee, what comes to your mind? Perhaps you think of words like legalists, or I think most people would probably say hypocrites, because Jesus called them hypocrites. And that would probably be right in a sense. We've been trained to think of a Pharisee as a negative type of person. We don't want to be Pharisees. But actually, among all of the religious groups of the day, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and so on, among all of them, Jesus' discipleship ministry style and belief system was most like the Pharisees. The word Pharisee means pious one. And for the most part, the Pharisees were godly people who loved God. Now, were some of them hypocrites? Absolutely, right? And actually, the other Pharisees would call those Pharisees out for being hypocrites. It's very same today. Do you know Christians who are hypocrites? I bet you do. And if you're not careful, you might be one, right? In reality, Pharisees were God-fearing people who were trying their best. And in the end, they had some big failures when it came to understanding who Jesus was, okay? Now, let me pivot here, and all this will come together. Let me share some things about Jewish life, and specifically how that would have impacted Jesus' life as a child in ways that we may not know just straight from the text. What we refer to as the Old Testament, they would have called the Tanakh, okay, Tanakh. It included the Torah, so the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the prophets, and the writings. Now, they also had something called the Mishnah. The Mishnah were writings from other rabbis about the Tanakh. Think of them like commentaries on the Bible. I use commentaries all the time. They did not see them as equal to Scripture, but every rabbi heavily leaned on the Mishnah for their learning and their teaching. Every Jewish child went through an educational process where they would learn both the Tanakh, so our Old Testament, and the Mishnah. At an age around 4 or 5, they would begin their educational process in something called Bes Sefor, okay? Some of this was traditional school, like math or reading, but most of their time was spent learning the Tanakh, the Scriptures. Specifically, the boys had to learn the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, And it's not the kind of learning that we're used to, right, in the Western world, where we can give you cliff notes of something or show you that we're familiar enough with it that we have some sort of understanding of it. They not only learned it, but they memorized it, okay? They memorized literal books of the Bible. Now, Best Sephora lasted until you were about 12 years old. And remember, in our text, how old is Jesus? He's 12 years old. We learn that from the Mishnah, that if you were successful in memorizing the Torah by age 12, then you had the privilege of going to Jerusalem at Passover to worship in the temple. What is happening in this text? I think what we see here is that Jesus has been going through Best Sephora. He has been successful in his schooling. He has memorized the Torah. And because of that, he gets to go to the temple during Passover. This whole scene is a backdrop for Jesus' educational process as a child. The visit of Jesus to this temple was part of the process of Jesus becoming a rabbi, which would be a central part of his ministry. And we overlook that sometimes. The best students in Beth Sephora, so ending at age 12, would go on to something that's called Beth Talmud. I'm not really sure how to say that. Which is where you would go and study the prophets. And the best of the best, at age 15, went on to something called Beth Midrash. And now, everyone else, you got all these kids in this educational system, right? The best of the best would go on to Beth Midrash, and every single other kid that wasn't the best of the best, they went on into the family business, fishing, farming, whatever. Think about Peter in the family business of fishing. That meant he had essentially flunked out of school. Now, in Beth Midrash, these teenagers would go and they would find a rabbi. There were only a few rabbis, right? And they would go and they would sit at the feet of a rabbi, and they would ask for permission to sit at their feet and be their disciple. Okay. Now, we're going to get into this more as we go throughout the Gospel of Luke. Excuse me. But for today's text, let me just say this. At age 30, you could finally become a rabbi. But here's the thing. You could not just be ordained as a rabbi. You couldn't just say, hey, I'm going to be a rabbi, and they give you a stamp of approval. You're a rabbi now. If you were a rabbi, that meant that you had displayed to your community that knew you well, the people around you, you had showed them that you could be trusted with God's word, and therefore, they gave you the title of rabbi. It wasn't just something that was given, it was something that was earned through time and trust, okay? Now with that background, let's look at Jesus at age 12, and I want you to just notice the rabbi in him, okay? Verse 46, and after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them, asking them questions, and all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. What's stunning is that even at age 12, Jesus is displaying to those around him that there is something different about him. There's something different about him, okay? He's on this path to become a rabbi, asking questions, learning, and everyone around him is amazed at his understanding. Now, let me say something else. There were two types of rabbis, okay? The most common type of rabbi was a Torah teacher. They were the ones who would teach the children. And they didn't have disciples, okay? They were just teachers. They were also not making new teachings. That was something that they could do. They only told you what the scriptures said or what other rabbis said about the scriptures, which leads to the second type of rabbi. Excuse me. The second type of rabbi was a rabbi who had shmiha. Shmiha. Shmiha means authority. So there's a second type of rabbi that has authority. They can make new teachings. These new disciples, they can make new teachings, or these new rabbis, they can make new teachings, and they can also have disciples. They could take the scriptures and expand on it and teach those things to their disciples. Let me show you two texts. Luke 4:31, talking about Jesus, says he went down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and he was teaching them on the Sabbath. And they were astonished at his teaching, for his word possessed authority. For his word possessed shmiha, authority. Here's another one. Luke 20, verse 1. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders came up and said to him, "Tell us by what authority you do these things, or who is it that gave you this authority? Who is that gave you this shmiha?" So what's happening here? Jesus is going around teaching, he's casting out demons, he's challenging the other rabbis and the religious leaders, and he's saying things like, "You've heard it said, but I say to you," right? Why can he do that? Because he has shmiha. But they're questioning it. Now, why are they questioning it? Because the only way you could get shmiha is if the other rabbis, if two other rabbis give it to you. So they're literally asking Jesus, "Hey, who gave you the authority of shmiha?" So let's ask the question: where did Jesus get his shmiha? Let me take it to Matthew 3:13. It says, "Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to John to be baptized by him. John would have prevented him, saying, 'I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?' But Jesus answered, 'Let it be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness.' Then he consented. And when Jesus was baptized, immediately he went up from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him. He saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and coming to rest on him. And behold, a voice from heaven said, 'This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased.'" Trying to get the sun out of my face. There we go. So where did Jesus get his shmiha? First, he got it from John the Baptist. John the Baptist baptized him. John the Baptist was also a rabbi, so he could give shmiha. And second, Jesus got his shmiha from God himself. Jesus is the only rabbi to get his shmiha directly from God. I think that's pretty cool. Where he says, "This is my beloved Son," right? In other places it says, "Listen to him." Now, here's the point I want to make with all that. The people saw Jesus as a rabbi. When Jesus walked around, they didn't see him as some alien that dropped down into our midst. And I think this text, which is really the only text that tells us what Jesus was like as a child, this text is showing us that Jesus was fully human. And it was part of God's plan for him to be a rabbi, to be among the people, to gain the trust of the people, and to teach the people as a rabbi within the Jewish setting. Okay? If you think about what we're going to see in the Gospel of Luke, much of it is going to highlight Jesus' divinity. He's commanding storms, he's casting out demons, he's multiplying bread and fish, but this text is reminding us that Jesus had to learn. I mean, Jesus was a student. He had parents that worried about him. He had to grow in wisdom, right? And so we see the humanity of Jesus in this text, but also in this text, we see that although Jesus was growing and learning, he also knows who he is. He knows that he's the Son of God. That last statement, that his parents says they did not understand Jesus, that's Luke's way of saying to us as the reader, hey, there's more here than meets the eye. This is the point. Don't miss it. They were searching, and finally they find him at the temple. Now, where could they have searched? They could have searched in the playground, the local swimming hole, in the shops. But in verse 49, it says, Jesus answers, and he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" And I think one of the main points of this whole passage probably lies in between those two fathers, right? Where Mary says, "Your father," and Jesus says, "My father." Mary says, "Your father and I have been searching for you." Jesus answers, "You should have known I would be at the house of my Father." In other words, Jesus is reminding them and us, right? He's on the brink of manhood. He's on this path to become a rabbi. But he's reminding his parents in an unforgettable way that he knows who his real father is and what that means for his mission. It will mean, Simon said back in Luke 2:35, "A sword will pierce through your soul also, Mary." Right? The time will come when Jesus will be killed at Jerusalem and after 3 days rise from the dead, and that will be a great pain to Mary. And he's reminding her, this is my Father's house, right? So it seems that one of the main teachings of this passage is that Jesus is now recognizing, at least for us, his unique sonship to God, and that his mission will require of him to seek the path of a rabbi. And so you see just in these in this moment, the humanity of Jesus and the divinity of Jesus come together, right? that he's on this human path of becoming a rabbi that's planned by God. But also, he knows where this path leads. He's in his Father's house. He knows who he is. Okay, and we're going to see Jesus follow that path throughout the Gospel of Luke. And so in that, and I love that this is the way that Luke sets the stage for Jesus' adult ministry, where we've got these two things. You got his role as a rabbi, where he's going to begin calling disciples in the next few chapters and begin healing people, but over and over again we're reminded there's something more going on here, something bigger going on here, and I love that. And that's really going to pick up in chapter 3, about 18 years later, and that is where we're going to pick it up on Sunday, where these two worlds are going to collide. The Rabbi Jesus and the Son of God, right, on this path to Jerusalem. And I cannot wait to jump into it with you. Love you guys. Missed you on Sunday. Pray for us this week as we talk to students. I just look forward to jumping in more with you all. Thanks.